Okay, so Tracy is here connected. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take like what's the meeting IDs here.
Yeah, I have the.
We can just take a look here. If we click, just say, let's see, information. See. Oh,
Yeah, it's
okay.
isn't it?
Okay, this shade, this green shapes.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Tracy, can you hear us? Can you write on the chat? Oh. Okay, perfect. I will try to give you permission to chat. I think participants 3. Okay. So you could talk here. I can.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay, we have to set up the speakers yet, but perfect. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, you cannot see the room until no. Okay.
No, all I can see is you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, everything is so empty. I have walked around and it's like, oh, hi. Finally. Okay, wait. Don't worry. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna mute you for now, Tracy. I will speak with you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, how are you? How was the
Good, it's fine.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, it was like really what we want to so like there was to be nothing. I think it's not, but yeah, I don't really know what this. Well, we do. Sounds so good. I said the kid was like, I'm not doing it. You were the right like silent. Yeah, so I'm looking for the race. Where yes, if someone posts up. Once in a while was very good. Yeah, we are going to know the switch forward to story. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. And for the speaker, 300% is that. Yeah, more like just a little bit. Yeah, sure. Yeah, technically the speakers. Yeah. So if they talk, they will be on the speakers, right? So I can give, can you talk, Tracy?
Yep,
Yeah.
this is me talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's from the laptop. Okay, so it's audio maybe?
No,
No.
it's more from it. So
So the speaker, yeah.
could
Yeah.
you try to mute yourself and to talk with somebody to see if they can hear, so we can go through the microphone.
Okay. So it's not one of these options, right? Like this,
Yeah,
the
you
two?
don't need to, oh, right, you need to choose, yeah, choose this one, this one.
Can you speak again, Tracy?
Yep, can you hear me now?
So now we cannot hear you at all.
Ah.
Okay.
Oh, you can't hear me at all?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, let's try. Okay, for those online, sorry, we're gonna start a bit later because people is still registering. And yeah, so we are gonna give them some time. And Laurie, you want to talk? Well, wait, I'm gonna try because we cannot hear you yet.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Hey, I just wanted to say that I can hear Tracy,
Okay, okay, you can
if
hear.
that helps with
Okay.
anything you're doing.
Okay, no, yeah, we need to set the speakers on live, so we are trying, but thanks.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, allowed to talk maybe,
No,
no?
it's more so. From the panels.
Okay,
Try this.
okay, let's try. Okay, and I should mute myself, right?
Good morning, this is Helen. I've just seen a message that I should unmute, so checking that you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you, Helen. Thanks and welcome.
Thank you, good morning. I hope you received my recording in good order.
I have not actually. I don't know. Let me check.
I had to send it from a different email address, but I am here live and the connection is
Okay,
fine.
yeah, yeah, looks fine. Okay, so perfect.
All right,
No,
great.
we'll manage. But thanks a lot, Helen.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna share the screen and we can start. Close this now. So Can you hear me online?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes, hearing you.
Yeah.
Okay. So move this. And yeah, perfect. So I'm gonna start. Good. So welcome everyone to the workshop Towards a Safer Web for Women, the first international workshop on protecting women online here at the Web Conference 2025. I'm Angel Pavón, a research associate at the Center for Protecting Women Online in the UK, and together with other fantastic organizers, Christine, that is a researcher in NLP at the University of Melbourne, Miriam Fernandez, professor in responsible AI and lead in responsible AI at the Center for Protecting Women Online, Tracy Farrell, a future lead in the UK and working at the Open University, and Deborah Nosa, a professor at Bocconi University. So before we start, I would like to mention about health and safety. Obviously, as you might expect, we are going to talk about some harsh topics, mostly related with gender violence. So if at any time you need to step out, please feel free to do. And if you need any support, please, you can contact me or the other organizer, Christine, who will join us shortly, but for some issues with the flights and taxis, she will be a bit late. So yeah, so if you need anything, please just let me know. And I'm sure also Olga or Maria or keynote speakers will be happy to help you. So just to bring a brief of an introduction of the problem, also I'm sure that we all here know a lot, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. The gender-based violence online, it's like very broad online around every country. For example, like in South Korea, they are having a deepfake crisis in where teenagers are using Telegram groups to share deepfakes about their colleagues. Actually, today I just found like this newspaper from Australia saying that yeah, they are using deepfakes about women politicians and that they are sharing it online to attack them. So this is just today's news. So like yeah, like big problem. We also have like social media algorithms radicalizing young men towards women, and now that AI is being used widely, we have also the bias. So yeah, so this is a broad issue. So I'm very pleased to have you all here to chat about this and try to see which are the challenges and how are we going to face them. So this is the schedule that we have planned for today. We have divided the workshop in different sessions. First, we have the problem session to talk about which is the problem, where we will have Olga Jura's keynote and some paper presentations. Then we will have the how can we help and challenges session, in which we will talk about which are the challenges we are facing and try to answer the question why we haven't solved this problem yet. Why is this still a problem after so many years, and why is this increasing? After that, we will have our last session, the mitigation and how tech can help, which we will discuss not only how technology can solve this issue, but the importance of the interdisciplinary. We'll have also paper presentations and a discussion session to chat about it. And in previous sessions, sorry, I forgot to mention that we also have our keynote speakers, Marianne Nguyen and Helen Atkins. So lastly, I would like to thank everyone who's joining us today, especially our keynote speakers for the inspiring work and for giving a talk here. Also to all the authors and special thanks also for Protecting Women Online for the support since the start of this project. And yeah, to everyone here attending, that I'm sure that you are going to engage a lot on the discussion sessions, and we are going to find interesting insights. So that's it from my side. I don't want to extend it more because we have already started a bit late. So please, now we are going to start with Olga's keynote, or first keynote. So please welcome her. And yeah, so thanks.
Just find myself on
Yeah.
this desktop because there isn't that much space. Oops. Okay. I hope that I have not destroyed something here. There goes hope. Oh, good. Yeah, perfect. Right, good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much to Angel and also other organizers of the workshop for pulling it all together. As Angel said, I'm Olga Jurasz. I'm a director of the Center for Protecting Women Online, and I'm delighted to be here to deliver the first keynote, but I cannot claim absolutely anything to do with organization of that. That's all Angel, Miriam, and other colleagues that have been mentioned. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to be here at the web conference. As you gather perhaps from the first slide, or perhaps not, I am actually not a computer scientist, and I have absolutely nothing to do with that disciplinary area. I'm actually a lawyer. So please bear with me, please be gentle. But I have long looked at violence against women and girls, and for over the past decade, my interest has mostly been in digital and online forms of violence against women. And what I have ultimately found is that actually not one single discipline is able to sort out this major societal problem. That's why perhaps what's the vibe that you will be getting from my talk is very much a call to arms for computer scientists, lawyers, sociologists, psychologists, and people across actually all disciplines to look at this major societal issue today together and try to find a solution. Therefore, it's a great pleasure to be here and to explore it in this major conference. But it doesn't go unnoticed looking at the program that issue of women or gender perspective is not particularly well represented here. So I'm even more excited that we have received space to hold that workshop and to explore this issue and to really fill that gap and start the conversation about not only women's and gender perspective on tech and online safety, but also cross-disciplinary dialogue about challenges that are facing actually all of us in that space. And why now? I mean, Angel very nicely gave you a few examples. Why now? Because now we are facing a pandemic of online and tech-facilitated violence against women and girls. It's got wide-ranging societal and cultural impacts, including normalization of violence against women and girls in everyday life. And both tech and online spaces are playing a major part of that. It would also be not fair to not notice the broader geopolitical context of today and where all of this is happening. We're facing general backsliding in relation to women's rights, to gender equality, to inclusivity, and it includes very much online spaces. And as I said, despite the hypervisibility of this problem and as Angel said, pretty much you can grab a newspaper of your choice today, and perhaps there will be something about either deepfakes or other forms of online or tech-facilitated violence. Despite that hypervisibility of these forms of violence in everyday life, no single discipline, no single jurisdiction has managed to create lasting and meaningful solutions that would actually move the dial and change the reality for women and girls in online spaces. So in this presentation today, I would like to draw on some key challenges, especially in terms of law and policy making when it comes to regulation of online spaces and ensuring women's online safety. So I will start by looking at women's experiences of online spaces today, as they are quite different than they perhaps have been a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, definitely different than 10 years ago. And also place it in a broader geopolitical and social context. I will then take a turn to look at law and policy responses or attempts to regulate tech and regulate online spaces to create perhaps more pro-social behaviors. And I would perhaps look specifically at online violence against women and girls here to unearth some of the key flaws and challenges in recent attempts to actually address women's online safety. I will there focus particularly on the UK and also Europe in terms of examples of regulation. I know Maria will be looking at Australia later on today. And then I would also like to explore here the issue that I think is absolutely crucial and cannot go unnoticed, and that's the question of power. And here, I mean, not only financial power, but power of platform providers, financial and geopolitical power that they increasingly hold, and vis-a-vis that, a rather questionable power of law and legal regulation in trying to regulate these really powerful actors to ensure inclusivity and equal spaces for all. So when we look at the experiences of women and girls online today, we see a picture that's quite different than perhaps 5 or 10 years ago. We see online and tech-facilitated violence against women being normalized, happening every day in all spaces, in all walks of life, and being really hyper-visible. It's no longer an issue that just hits the news or hits the headlines, you know, once every now and then, because let's say a celebrity has received a barrage of online abuse. It is happening to ordinary women and girls in schools, and Hal mentioned example of South Korea earlier on. But it has really, the various forms of online and tech-facilitated violence have really started to have really wide-ranging effects. And this is where I think we hit the topic of harms that arise from online and tech-facilitated violence against women. So what we see is that these forms of violence are increasingly used in context of elections. We are in a super election year, or just coming to the end of it. I know Australia will have elections, I think, coming up as well. And we see that these forms of violence are increasingly used to spread misinformation about particularly female political candidates, to disrupt the dialogue, to disrupt the stability of potential democratic elections. But also what we notice is that particularly women and female political candidates are targeted with deep fakes and other forms of online abuse in attempt to question their credibility and ultimately to disrupt the process for them in such a way that they don't actually reach their political office, or the possibility of them doing so is actually minimized. In a recent study, it was found also that women in Congress, so women lawmakers, are 70 times more likely to be victims of deepfake porn than their male counterparts. What we also see that nudify apps are now increasingly common. It is not particularly difficult to access them, or you don't need particularly high tech skills to use them. So the accessibility of these forms of technology has become really it's become really easy to access. It has become really easy to create essentially non-consensual nudes. And that actually includes children. And as Hal said, what we see is that this is a problem not only affecting adults, but increasingly is also used in schools, but by much younger people as well. In recent years, and this is the topic very much, I think, close to Angel's heart and also Tracy's, we do see a bit more attention, or a bit more alerts, I think, about AI bias, and also different applications, not only applications of AI, but also different examples of where bias comes to the fore. What you see on the slide here is an example of AI being sexist in the hiring process, but also we see research, particularly from Angel, looking at AI bias in financial context, in context of credit assessment, credit risk assessment, and in context of financial services. And there is very clear gender perspective coming through here as well, in that, and this is a very often an ignored issue, that actually links to what I perhaps would frame as economic harms arising from this kind of bias. And I would actually, perhaps in my own research, frame it as a form of economic violence against women, although traditionally it is understood as being much more narrow than the example I just mentioned. And last but not least, we do see online and tech facilitated violence being used against journalists, against human rights defenders. And this is a serious issue, particularly in context of democracies that are perhaps less stable, in context of countries that are often transitioning from violent conflict to hopefully lasting peace. These contexts have not escaped tech and online violence. It's very much part and parcel of those processes, yet it does escape legal regulation and legal attention. In the meantime, online and tech facilitated violence against women, as we once knew it, continues. But what we now see is still a lack of reliable data on online and tech facilitated violence against women. Especially in the UK, we have undergone quite a significant law reform, bringing in or introducing Online Safety Act, that unfortunately does not quite deliver for women online, but that's perhaps something we can explore in the workshop. But it raises an important question: how do we regulate something that we don't quite understand? And I think there is a real issue here about data collection and actually ensuring that there is a systematic data collection and kind of research-based and evidence-based law and policy making in place. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that data is collected that reflects women's experiences. So in context of the UK, a couple of years ago, I actually run the largest and so far the only survey in the UK, surveying over 7,800 people, looking at women's experiences of online and tech facilitated violence, their societal perceptions on regulation of online spaces, but also the survey went a little further to ask men and boys. The reason I say boys is because we surveyed also young men age 16 and over about their experiences of witnessing and responding to online violence against women and girls. And what the survey has found is that, perhaps unsurprisingly, 83% of women who experienced online violence said that it had impact on their lives. And what we have found is that there are three core categories of impact there. Perhaps, again, not surprisingly to many of you, the number one factor in terms of impact has been quoted as impact or negative impact on mental health and well-being, closely followed by measures that women found that they have to put in place to protect themselves online. So that can be anything from restricting privacy settings to also measures that they take that they put in place to protect themselves offline. So for example, increasing security in their homes. As we know, what happens online doesn't stay online, and I very much would like to encourage you to think about the topics we were discussing today as occurring on a continuum of violence against women, rather than kind of happening online and staying online and then something else happens offline. Actually, what we see is that the two worlds, just like in any other area of our lives, are actually merged, and it's very difficult to kind of say what stays online and vice versa. And last but not least, the third key impact on women has been silencing. So changing the way that they express themselves or choose to present themselves on social media, but also in online spaces. And this is particularly, I think, concerning when we are talking about women's participation in public life, because it's very difficult, at least for me, it's very difficult to imagine a more public space than the internet and online spaces nowadays. And in terms of experiences, women, when asked, why do you think online violence happens to you? Women identified their sex, gender, or gender identity, and the views they hold as top 3 factors contributing to the online violence they experienced. Also, what the survey has found is that approximately 2/3 of women actually went on to report the violence they experienced online, mostly to platform providers, least to the police, not big surprises there, I think. But it also, that finding actually put in question the kind of the assumption that women just stay silent and don't talk about what happens to them online. Actually, they do report, but the efficiency and the effectiveness of that reporting seems to be fairly low also in women's perception of these processes. And I think what is most alarming that perhaps came out of the survey is that young women, so for purposes of the study, it was defined as women aged 16 to 24, are actually the least likely to report online violence to anybody. So that can be to platform providers, to the police, to friend, family member, or support organizations dealing with this type of issues. And this is particularly alarming because it is actually the younger women that bear the brunt of online and tech-facilitated violence against women. They are the most likely to have experienced and witnessed such forms of violence, but also they are the most likely to know people who committed these acts of violence against them, and for that kind of violence to also move offline. And these findings actually point towards, I think, not only the fact that online violence and offline violence occur on a continuum of violence against women and girls, they are not kind of separate, but also that we face a crisis of normalization of violence against women and girls. And particularly, I think, for young women to normalize these experiences and to just say, well, this is just the cost, or this is just something that happens to everybody, doesn't it? Is particularly alarming. And last but not least, I think what we definitely have seen, maybe not particularly changing, but I think erupting and really being more widespread, is the rise of everyday misogyny online and offline. We see quite a lot of misogynistic attitudes occurring in context of online gaming. The example that you have on the slide here is No Mercy, which has huge focus on incest and male domination. So it's not just spreading kind of gender stereotypes, it's actually promoting quite harmful attitudes towards women. I suspect that nobody needs an introduction to the person in the middle, Andrew Tate, who, apart from facing charges for trafficking in Romania, is particularly, I think, well known as, I think, #1 example of misogynistic internet influencer. I think through particularly promoting inferiority of women, very often being portrayed, being shown online, or speaking online in a way that not only kind of, completely, how would I best put it, ignores women as equal partners in that space, but actually actively promotes and incites violence against women and girls. And this is a part of, I think, his TikTok video that he's showing particularly other men and boys how he thinks girls and women should be handled. What is particularly alarming is that we know that the algorithms are also set up in such a way that such content is also particularly promoted to young men and boys, which brings us to this position of a vicious circle of essentially this behaviors being not only promoted but actively encouraged. And it also goes to show the very insidious way in which platforms and platform providers are in fact complicit in promoting violence against women and girls on their platforms. And last but not least, I think there is a growing appreciation these days for the now well-established link between misogyny and extremism, as well as far right. What you see here is a study, a comparative study on the far right in the UK and Australia, which has found exactly that there is a strong link between misogyny, both online and offline, the rise of far right and the rise of extremism. Yet, despite this growing recognition of this connection, both in research and at some levels in supranational policymaking, a lot of misogynistic content online is not viewed as extremist when it comes to takedown. So the question, I guess, from me is, what is the cost, and when is it that we will act as a society, we will take action against that? Perhaps, as many of you know, misogyny is actually not a criminal offense. It's not criminalized, it's not defined, but we do see these linkages to other quite concerning issues. So where does it leave law and policy making generally? It perhaps feels right now that law has absolutely no space here, or has very little to say in this context. So I will now move to look into sort of UK experience in trying to grapple with this issue. So as I said, and when we look at law and policy making in the UK, it's quite easy to fall into this trap of, I guess, a sense of comfort that we're doing okay. Particularly here, we've got Online Safety Act, which came into force almost 2 years ago, which was hailed to be a world-leading piece of legislation. I'm just going to come out here and say it's absolutely not. And there are quite a lot of gaps, but it has been over 6 years in the making. It's quite a long legislative process to bring that major piece of legislation into place. The reason why I say it hasn't quite delivered is because what we've seen over the course of legislative process leading to adoption of Online Safety Act was progressive dilution of women's of any provisions dealing particularly with women, with women's online safety. Of course, some forms of online violence against women and tech-facilitated violence have made it to Online Safety Act in a legally binding form, but actually many of issues that women are facing online have not. And the reason and the problem with that is that we are now in a position where Ofcom, that is the designated regulator for online safety, has been tasked with issuing guidance to platform providers on how to address women's online safety and online violence against women on their platforms. The problem with that is that it is not legislation, which means it's a beautiful thing to work on, but it's absolutely unenforceable. And the question then becomes, well, how would you then enforce it against powerful players like platform providers who very much know what is happening, but addressing women's online safety, addressing violence against women and girls is just not good for business because it does bring money. So there is a bigger question here about kind of the theater of lawmaking when it comes to women's online safety versus the actual enforceability of these provisions. We also have a new Labour government that has pledged to halve violence against women and girls in the next decade. That, we are told, includes online and tech-facilitated violence. We don't know much more because the strategy is yet to come out this summer. And I'm sure we will be busy in the center once this does come out, because it normally comes out for consultation as well. When it comes to policing, violence against women and girls, including tech-facilitated violence, has now been placed as the highest policing priority. It is now a strategic policing requirement, and it's part of strategic threat risk assessment. Now, for those of you who are not into the world of policing as much, essentially that means that violence against women and girls is, at least in principle, put on a par with terrorism in terms of police priority. Of course, when it comes to the reality of it, the reality looks quite different. There are huge issues surrounding policing capability of dealing with online and tech-facilitated violence, both in terms of knowledge and skills, and actually processing of things like evidence, for example, and digital evidence. So there are huge issues there, but there is at least a recognition of the priority of violence against women and girls in terms of policing. Also, both the UK government and devolved governments, so Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, have their own policies on tackling violence against women and girls, which again include online and tech facilitated violence. And not last but not least, UK is a party to international instruments such as CEDAW, which is Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and CEDAW Committee, that is a body overseeing the implementation of the convention, has for quite a few years now confirmed that online and tech facilitated violence is a form of discrimination against women, and particularly states that are parties to the convention need to take appropriate steps to address that. UK is also a party to the Council of Europe Convention on combating violence against women and girls and domestic violence. Again, the same pronouncements have been made in that context. And last but not least, UK is a party to the Council of Europe Framework Convention on AI, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which does mention gender equality, but again, in very, I think, quite vague terms. And it leaves a lot to question about the actual commitments of states to tackle matters arising at an intersection of AI, violence against women, human rights. Now, when it comes to law and policymaking, one of the main barriers that, I mean, definitely I've witnessed over the years is the linguistic fragmentation when it comes to both law and policymaking. And what I mean by that is that online tech facilitated violence against women is, of course, an umbrella term for quite a lot of different forms of violence, of different behaviors online, some of what you can see on the slide. I'm just going to say straight away that this is not an exhaustive list. It's just giving you some examples. But just on the slide here, you've got 20, perhaps the list by now is well over 30. And one of the things that we do in the center is actually we often come back to that conversation and see how in our different disciplines, we think about different forms of online harms, different forms of online and tech facilitated abuse. Now, why is that important? The reason why it's important is because all of these separate forms of online violence are somewhat different. And the fact that we may perhaps recognize them now in in everyday life, or we are starting to gain a better understanding of, let's say, what is involved in cyber harassment versus cyber stalking versus, let's say, doxing. Not all of these forms are actually defined within the law. Now, because they are not defined, that means it immediately narrows down the possibility for a person affected by those acts to bring in any proceedings or to essentially bring a case be it in civil proceedings or criminal proceedings to seek justice or compensation for any of these acts. Quite simply, when it comes to law, I think to combat something, you essentially need to name it and need to define it. Without that, we are left with major gaps in terms of enforcement and avenues for redress. And this is a huge issue that is, I think, not only UK specific. I would be definitely keen to hear from Maria about Australian experience here, but particularly at supranational level, this is also an issue that we face when kind of what terminology do we use and how do we try to harmonize it between different jurisdictions? Because as we know, laws are kind of jurisdiction specific, but online world does not quite know the geographical boundaries as we know it. And from that, I think it brings me to the question of online harms. So we talked about terminology and what challenges we see there in terms of harmonization, in terms of a number of different forms of violence. But here I'm looking at online harm. So kind of what happens after, or what is the effect? And again, when we look at law, particularly in the UK, there is still a very narrow understanding of online harms. So what are in other words, what are the effects of online and tech facilitated violence against women and girls. As I mentioned before, a lot of, not all forms of online violence against women and girls are criminalized or are captured in civil law. And a lot of that falls into that category of harmful, but not illegal, which of course poses a major issue here for not only women's safety, but actually very much limits the possibility or availability of legal remedies for women who are victims of such acts. What that means is that essentially we are facing a hierarchy of harms. So if, for example, you are a victim of deepfake abuse, perhaps or other forms of image-based abuse, your remedies would be perhaps a bit more clear to you. That cannot be said for other forms, particularly text-based forms of violence. And what you see on the slide here is an attempt from 2021, so 4 years ago, that a colleague of mine and I had at trying to map out the types of online harms arising from text-based forms of abuse. And as you can see, we've got things like economical harms, and that's why I kind of made a link to Angel's research earlier on about AI bias in financial context, but also things like democratic harms, where I think we particularly need to think carefully about those type of harms as kind of more social-based harms, more societal harms, and particularly linking it to, for example, online violence against women in politics, about political candidates, and so on. But again, this is quite a big discussion on its own. So I just wanted to put it out there and highlight it as, I think, one of the challenges for law to actually conceptually expand to allow that wider plethora of online harms being articulated. And an important part of conversation here is actually going beyond criminal justice. So at the moment, especially in the UK, what happens to women online and various forms of violence that they face is particularly narrowly viewed through the lens of violence against women and girls, and mostly criminal law. Very rarely we see linkages to other parts of law and policy areas, such as technological and digital development, cybersecurity, international peace and security. And as I said earlier, we do have evidence now that, for example, matters like online misogyny do feed into extremism. Therefore, it should be viewed as a matter of international peace and security, cybersecurity, at least from a legal perspective. So what we do witness is this, what I've started to call gender intextuality and regulation by omission. So there tends to be kind of regulation of either violence against women and girls, and including online tech facilitated forms within that, or regulation of tech, for example, such as EU AI Act, but to the exclusion of gender perspective within that. Unfortunately, we still have that kind of parallel tracks that don't quite meet. So in other words, you're either looking at women's perspective, women's safety, gender perspective, or you're looking at tech. I'm now been a long-time advocate for those two routes meeting and the conversation starting in that context. What we also notice is that there is a significant gender gap in accessing online safety advice and online safety technology. And we see a kind of, I guess, a somewhat worrying, I think, trend to focus on or to demand women to demonstrate harmfulness of behaviors on platforms, rather than to place that burden on platforms and platform providers, demonstrating that they have undertaken procedures to ensure safety for users, safety by design, and also engage with questions of risk mitigation. So in other words, there seems to be this imbalance between kind of the proof of harm versus the proof of care. I don't want to call it duty of care, because that's a very specific thing in law. But there appears to be this power imbalance here as well, where I think victims of online violence, tech facilitated violence, are increasingly asked to demonstrate, well, so what was the harm to you? Show me. Why was it, why what happened to you was bad, rather than essentially people who release the product, who design the product, being put under a obligation to show that their product have been tested, is safe to release, and so on. One of our colleagues in the center has this long-standing metaphor here that you wouldn't quite release a new model of a car without testing car crashing and crash testing and so on, and definitely the car would have seatbelts. So I think that's their way of kind of comparing it. That's I think that quite some of the quite basic processes are not quite applicable when we think about women's online safety. And last but not least, I think in this context of gender and tech duality, we do see this reluctance of platforms to act. So I think the question is, is acting good for profit? Because what we definitely know is that platforms and platform providers are quite aware of various forms of online violence that is happening on their platforms. Definitely there is a growing amount of research and also one that is established now showing the harmful effects of such violence. But there is very little incentive, I think, for them to take action and to act. And why is that so? Which brings me to the question of power, tech power versus the power of law. I don't think I need to introduce many people in this picture. I think it has become quite a symbolic picture of an alignment of tech power with one of the main geopolitical powers and here, of course, I mean the US. And the power here is shown not only in a financial sense, but also we're talking here about the power of information, the control over tools that billions of people would use to communicate, understand the world, receive information, and so on. So essentially we have the new president of the United States with pretty much majority of, so it happens, men who hold that tech power of the world. And also this picture, I think, is quite symbolic in terms of showing the stark contrast between the global north and the global south in relation to the impact of digital harms, questions of online safety. And again, this brings up the question of the power of law in this context. It's very nice to stand here as a lawyer and kind of pitch for legal regulation and to, I guess, still believe in it. But do we actually have a go here? Is it really a real possibility that we will reach the point where law and legal regulation will actually move the dial, that people in this picture will actually take women's online safety seriously and as something that is actually good for business to take it seriously and to to put in place procedures, to put also finances in place to make sure that that the products and the spaces that they ultimately govern are safe for women. Which brings me to the question of the future of legal regulation. So if we even imagine that legal regulation has a role to play here, what would it look like? For me, tackling fragmentation is absolutely essential here. So by tackling fragmentation, I mean tackling linguistic fragmentation that I talked about, but also that fragmentation between tech and gender when it comes to approaches to law and policy making. At the moment, what we see a lot of, and it is not a good thing, is just adding online tech or digital and steer. So you take an old good policy on, let's say, or strategy on violence against women, you just insert online tech or digital, kind of metaphorically steer, and you hope for the best outcome. This does not make good law and good policy. So we need laws and policies that are taking women's perspectives from the start. And are designed to tackle specific problems surrounding women's online safety, surrounding online and tech-facilitated violence. To do so, we also need to go beyond criminal law. Criminal law offers remedies, but they are quite limited. So, for example, for victims of image-based sexual abuse, perhaps the main thing that they are looking for is actually having the images taken down and ensuring that they stay down, rather than going through quite lengthy criminal proceedings process to get very different type of justice. I think we also need to think beyond online safety in online safety legal hubs, or this is something that I started to describe it as. So of course, in the UK, we've got Online Safety Act. Australia is one of the other kind of legal hubs for online safety, but there are only just a few in context of the world. But these issues of women's online safety are not just specific to particular countries, but legal regulations, unfortunately, have become a bit stronger in just a few jurisdictions across the world. I think we need a bit more comprehensive approach here to actually ensure that these protections are not just for the few, but for women in other parts of the world. And we need to start viewing, in terms of law, online safety as a shared responsibility between private and public actors. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your view of the law, some obligations are placed on states, particularly when it comes to human rights. It's states that owe human rights obligations that would not extend to private sphere. So we need to think a bit more carefully about combining those different approaches and different liabilities between public and private actors to ensure that we've got that kind of legal puzzle where we work together between the private and public actors to address this issue. And what does that mean for online spaces, for greater safety in online spaces for women? As I said, law is only one tool in the toolbox. I don't think you come across a lawyer often kind of saying law will not sort it out. I will come and say quite happily, law will not be the only solution, but it's an important piece of the puzzle. And it's absolutely crucial that we work towards better legal protections and better legal regulation. But what we cannot absolutely afford to ignore is the importance of cross-disciplinary and cross-sectoral dialogue on women's online safety and dialogue that addresses online harms. We absolutely need to move to a point where safety by design is a foundation, not just selective good practice as it is now. And prevention appears to be an absolutely core issue going forward. I spoke earlier about the rise of online misogyny, the kind of hypervisibility of online violence in everyday life. And I think prevention needs to be a huge part of the conversation. And it's not just prevention of online violence, it's about making sure that the next generation knows how to behave responsibly online, not only in relation to women, but more generally too. And that any form of prevention actually tackles root causes of violence against women and girls and power structures to foster a lasting change. I will stop here. Actually, I will stop here. So you have some links here to Center for Protecting Women Online, because whilst I'm a lawyer and I like to talk about law and policy, there are other very interesting people in the center who, just like Angel and Miriam, do research in other disciplines. But what brings us all together is ultimately interest and care for women's online safety. And at the center, we believe that the only way forward on this issue is to actually foster that cross-disciplinary dialogue and cross-sectoral dialogue too. So if you are interested, please do connect with us on LinkedIn. Angel and I are here during the conference as well. But I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Olga. Does anyone have any questions? I thought, first of all, I can answer it very well. So
That's fine.
Yeah, well, like as most of us are like tech people, like
I know. You told me that before we came here.
so like my question is like what
I
wo-
think I think you need a charger.
oh, okay. Yeah, I would. Did that turn off or?
It's off.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, just in time, I guess. So, well, my question is like, what would you recommend for tech people so we can help for law to be quicker? Because I know that, for example, the deepfakes in many countries are not regulated. In the UK, to the best of my knowledge, it was just last year, and deepfakes have been around for like 8 years at least. So, yeah, is anything we can do from the tech side to try to make this faster and to have impact? Thank you.
I don't know about making it faster, but I think for me, you can't regulate something you don't know. So for me, it's really about having the dialogue. So it's not just, oh, let's invite some tech people for half an hour and then we will have good law. Law cannot kind of regulate something it doesn't quite understand. So I think it's a part of I think fostering that better dialogue is to actually involve people with tech knowledge from a start, and likewise involve lawyers and psychologists and people who may have the different perspective before you actually commence any kind of regulatory process. Because you mentioned, you know, the UK example. So we've had 6 years of the Online Safety Act, well, Online Safety Bill, as it was initially. Actually, random fact, it started as Online Harms Bill. So we went from online harms to online safety, but that's a part of a different story. And in course of this whole 6 years, yes, we have criminalization now of deepfakes and creation of deepfakes. But somehow in the whole process, people have forgotten to actually criminalize solicitation of creation of deepfakes. I mean, seems like a simple thing to think about, but it's just, I think it's worth remembering that law and policy, well, particularly lawmakers, they are not specialists in, let's say, deepfakes. They will very much rely on expert evidence and so on when in that process. So it's absolutely crucial to be a part of that conversation, and to have that input from various disciplines to then put, I think, lawmakers in a position which frankly we don't like to be, because we like to be comfortable with kind of what we know, but just say like, okay, what you're trying to do here will not work in practice, because that's just not how this is going to pan out. But perhaps only you with particular tech knowledge would have that persuasive argument. So I think it is mostly about having the dialogue and having it quite early. Law is a very slow process, yeah, lawmaking. So I think, you know, law will always come last. I think technology will develop first and at a much higher pace. But it is important to have that conversation so then we don't end up with quite lengthy and complex laws that actually are not quite fit for purpose, like in risk assessments context that we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Olga.
Shall we connect
Yes.
people online?
There's no charger. Yeah.
We've got one here. But
Yes, but I don't know where to charge. Sorry, like we're around, like Christine, do you have? Yeah, so, well, this is Christine, other organizer. So it's just arrived in perfect timing for saving me. Yeah, you have in the drive, the slides. So, yeah, actually now the talk is on Zoom technically, so can you connect to the Zoom link? We don't have anything.
Okay, just a few moments. We are connecting.
Yes, because I run out of battery and yeah, like we don't find a plug to charge it. Yeah, you can.
So I need to log in.
Should we log in with the, yeah, so we have a specific account. Yeah, sorry for the tech issues.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, she can do it online because she has the slides, so but for the next speaker, we need the slides. I can charge it a bit, and send it, and then we can come back.
I have to log all your accounts. So I can log in
You
with
can do
them.
whatever you need to
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so now we are gonna start with the paper presentations. The first paper presentation, it will be online, and it's the only one due to some issues of the speaker. Yeah, so we are trying to connect the Zoom, and once we are ready, we can start. Of course, the thing goes. Yeah, it is, but maybe like it disconnects it everyone. Okay, should we start maybe with the second presentation? Yeah, okay, so maybe we can start with the second presentation while we fix the online thing. So if I'm right, let me check the schedule there. Yeah, try go to the right, and so there's a folder that is slides. Like, So we have the slide, so if you want like
Okay, so I have the slides.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot.
I hope that it will- No? Slides? Yeah.
Yeah, we use the new laptop. Do you have the vision there? I have there, you can see here. Would you please just mute the audio of your laptop? Yeah, thank you. Not of the Zoom video, of the laptop, okay?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I believe that I'm the second lawyer today, so this is nice because I'm not from the tech field. Actually, I'm a Marie Curie postdoctoral research fellow at University Oberta de Catalunya, running a project about the FinTech. That is basically the technology industry designed for women's health and well-being. In this paper, I wrote together with my supervisor. He's from sociology, social science. So we are trying to do what Olga told us, to make this cross interdisciplinary debates. And the project is basically about trying to build some kind of regulation about this kind of industry that could be a little bit more protective, and considering how end users are feeling, experiencing when they use this kind of technology. The main idea is trying to understand how menstruation apps, ovulation apps, fertility apps are impacting WIMA's lines. So I divide the presentation in three main topics. First, present the problems. Later, our current legal and ethical framework. And for the end, trying to propose some of kind of ideas regarding women's data protection. So what women think when they are downloading this kind of applications, a menstruation app or fertility app? They are looking for predict ovulation. They are looking for track their periods. In some cases, prevent pregnancies, but also looking for becoming pregnant. Empower themselves about their knowledge about their bodies and other reasons that will depend. Okay. Okay, okay. So I will start again.
Sorry, we'll adjust it.
Okay.
So could you please go to Zoom? Yeah, sure. I need to share this. So it's not very clear. Let me see.
No, but I switched. I have the Zoom call. Don't worry, she can continue. If you want to set up my laptop.
It's not gonna be recorded.
Oh,
You okay with that?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, share the presentation. Okay, you can.
So, and try to build some kind of proposals. As Olga told us, we need to be a little bit more integrated with other disciplines. And from my point of view, when we are talking about this kind of problems, women's online problems is some kind of holistic approaches, not just interdisciplinary, but with different actors. So, when I was telling that women's desires when they are using this kind of apps, but what is actually happening? And what is actually happening is based on the literature and on the press work. Because when we are talking about women's issues, especially about fertility, reproduction, is a very taboo. And they are not speaking this out loud. So most of these concerns is private concerns that we will only know when we might start to talk about this. And considering FETAC, what we have gender bias, reinforcement of gender binary stereotypes, exposure to potential manipulation and behavioral control by tech companies, because when humans are using this kind of apps, they are putting a lot of information about how they are feeling today, what is my fertility and my period data. So a lot of information that we don't know what they can do with this. We have the unwanted pregnancies because most of these women are using this kind of technology as a contraceptive method, even when it's not a contraceptive method. We have inaccurate predictions of ovulation and fertility windows. The user